So today I want to talk a little bit about a couple different things. First of all, I want to talk more about how do we get younger people involved in ham radio, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about my trip that I just got back from. I do live down here in Colorado Springs. I would have liked to go up and be there in person. I much prefer that over a Zoom call. But thank you for your patience in getting this set up, and we'll hop right into it. So why is the focus on getting more young people involved so important? I don't think I really have to spend a lot of time on this one. I think we all understand. The average age of hams currently is around 70 years old. We have two graphs here. The first one shows the difference between the number of silent keys that we have every year versus the number of younger recruits that we have. The pie chart just shows the different age groups. Less than 5% are under the age of 20. And ham radio, like, why do we want to get more young people involved? What does it give them? Ham radio is not just a hobby. For these young people, they can make connections on a global scale. There's a very good community. There's a lot of mentorship. Here's some photos from a ham radio summer camp that I'll talk more about in just a minute. And the one thing they do every time they have this camp is what they call an intercultural exchange night. And so these young people from every different country have tables to kind of represent something from their culture, whether that's, food, whether that's, a song or a dance, just something from their culture to share with other people. And I think it's a great way for the young people to build connections with, other young people that's not right in their immediate vicinity. So starting at how do we spark interest in young people? On a club level, make it hands-on whenever possible. This is definitely great for younger people. Things like fox hunts, some simple kit building. Um, some good ideas for kits like that are like the Morse code oscillators. Honestly, anything that they can actually like take home and use, maybe like a simple antenna build, but not something that they can like just build and then, not really have any practical use for. Make sure it's something that they'll continually use. A good way is to support science fairs. If you reach out to your local school, they usually have, science fairs every year, and you can, as a club, say, hey, we'll give a certain award for science fair projects that are, something related to ham radio, which is a great way for kids, that might be their first, the first time they've heard about ham radio, they're learning what it is, and they can do a science fair project on it. Inviting school groups to things you do as a club, like field days, if you do anything like the POTA activations, summits on the air, even if you just have, like a club picnic, if you have like a GOTA station, things like that. Most young people, this is how their first contact is made through a GOTA station, whether that's at a field day, like I said, sometimes when groups have even just like a club picnic, they'll have a station there. And a lot of the young people, this is how their first contact, this is their first introduction to what ham radio is. It's a great way to get them involved. Another good way is to organize a contact with the space station. A lot of young people are already interested in space, and so whenever you tie that interest in space, together with making a contact with someone from the space station, it's a good first step in the door for them. This one I think is honestly one of the most important, and it's kind of overlooked in my opinion, but connecting on the young people's level. So having a club presence on platforms that are actively used by young people. Most people my age aren't out here checking their email threads every day. We need to have a presence on, if we're doing an event and we're trying to, advertise it, publicize it, put it on platforms where the young people are actually going to see it, like Instagram, YouTube, Discord, things like that. And another thing is to talk to them, not at them. So treating them as equals, not just, some kid in the corner. Have actual conversations with them, ask them questions while they're asking you questions. I did kind of a small survey along um, with some of my friends that are young hams. Just curious how they first heard about ham radio. Most of them said it was through some kind of like a school club. Some of them said it was during COVID. But a lot of it had to do with, groups at their school, which is great. This one I found very interesting. Another question I asked when I was doing this survey, I asked what their favorite mode was because I feel like a lot of people just assume that um, the younger generation in ham radio just um, really loves the digital modes. And I actually found that to not be true. So about half and half was between CW and sideband, but a lot of the young people said they don't actually enjoy digital modes. Like FT8, they said things like they felt they weren't 100% authentic radio, they found it boring, etc. So over the next couple slides, I want to talk about a couple different groups that are like organizations that are really good for young people to get involved with. So if you know any young people, whether they're licensed or not, if you're trying to get them licensed, feel free to take pictures of these and share them with them because they're very good resources. So the first one is the YOTA program. This started over in Europe as Youngsters on the Air. We now have it over here as Youth on the Air. They do a couple different things. This is the organization that hosts the summer camp that I mentioned earlier. I was at the one this year they had it up in Thornton near Denver. And it was my first time going to one of their summer camps, and it was great. They also have one over in Europe every year. Just a week of, young people from all over the world. We always have a station that you can operate. There's a lot of, presentations by other young people, a lot of kit building. This year we went out and did both a Parks on the Air and Summits on the Air activation. Um, it's a really great way for kids to, meet other young people. I think that's super important for them to actually stay active in the hobby, not just get licensed, but to actually stay active is if they know people and they have people that they, have been connected with and they can keep in contact with. Another thing Yoda does through the whole month of December, you can apply for special call signs. Um, Usually they end in Y, O, T, or A. And they also host contests throughout the year for young people. Um, whether you're an entry-level contester or you're more experienced, I think it's a great way for the young people just to get on the air and contest with other young people. Another great one is the Yacht Team, Young Amateurs Communications Ham Team. This isn't a group like a physical group of people. It's more like it's a group we meet on Link every week. So throughout the week, they have more informal chat sessions where there'll be a question every night that the young people all get to take turns answering. And then on Saturday, it's a more formal net. And a lot of the young people actually run the net every week. And it's really great for them to stay connected. I enjoy that. So School Club Roundup is a really good way to kind of get in the door at schools. It's a good experience for the young people. For most of them, this is, the first time that they've heard about it. It goes all the way from elementary school all the way up to university. It happens twice a year. So basically what it is setting up a station at a school, and most schools will give the students credit, for whether that's in their science class or whatever class that might be. They can get credit for, making contacts and things like that. Young Amateurs Radio Club, this is one that has a really good online presence. They have a Discord group. You can see this screenshot I took the other day, 686 members online. So it's a really good group for, if you have uh, pretty much any question, there's at least someone in there that either knows the answer or knows, of someone or has resources. So it's a great way for the young people to just kind of, get out there and ask questions, make friends. The YCP Youth Contesting Program, this is organized by Connor, W4IPC, and Grace, Kilo 8 Lima Golf. The goal of the youth contesting program is, obviously a lot of young people, we don't have just big contest stations, at our house. So the goal of the youth contesting program is to pair, contest stations or even just stations in general with young people in an area. So the goal is to have, multiple young people from a certain area be able to go to a station, a host station and get on the air. The contest stations that are currently part of this, PJ2T in Curacao, J62K St. Lucia, HQ9 X-Ray, and PJ6Y. Remote ham radio, this is another great one, especially if, most young people don't even have a station, don't have access to a station at home. RHR has made it possible. They give, 21 years and under, basically a free membership. You get unlimited access to all of their remote stations. It's a really great way for them to get on the air and make contacts even without a physical station at their house. So a little bit about my story. I got into ham radio through my dad. He liked to make it a challenge between all of us kids. There's 9 people in my family, so I'm one of 7, and he kind of challenged all of us to, get our license upgrade. He kind of made it a competition between us siblings. Um, so that's how I got started. All 9 people in my family are licensed at various levels. And he gave me another challenge if I could work DXCC in a year with no internet. Then he would give me my first HF radio. So that's when I really fell in love with DXing. And then from there, I got more into contesting. So my first contest operation from a larger station was at W3LPL. This was back in 2018. It was like Sunday afternoon on, like 80 meters. It wasn't anything crazy. They didn't have me starting out or, running huge pileups, but it was a really good way to, it was my first time being at a station of that size. And like the best thing was just meeting the other operators, talking to them, learning from their experiences. The first DX operation I've done, this was in Curacao at the PJ2T station. We were using the call sign PJ2Y. And this was through a group called the Dave Coulter Memorial Youth DX Adventure. Every year they raise funds to send a group of kids. And it's not always down to Curacao. They've changed the location. But I think they often go down there because it's just a great place. But they raise funds to send several youth down there for, a week, week and a half, and they get to, operate and be the DX. So that was really fun being on the other end of the pileups. So from that first contest experience I had at W3LPL, um, and then the chance to work with other young people through the being down in Curacao, I really wanted to kind of take the aspect of working with other young people and also the aspect of contesting and kind of pair them together. So I had this idea of making a contest team, primarily youth, for this was back in 2019. And so I went to Tim Duffy with my idea. I said, hey, this is kind of what I want to do. I want to get these youth together. We want to do a contest, and asked if we could use his station. K3LR usually does not enter in the WPX sideband contest, so that's one that he didn't already have a team for. So this was back in 2019. We entered as Multi 2. We had a heck of a lot of fun. It was great. We didn't win first place worldwide. We did win first place in North America. I think we were like third or fourth, maybe. But we definitely beat the goals that we had set, and it was a lot of fun. The next contest that I had done, this was last year for the CQ Worldwide in October. This was again at the station in Curacao, PJ2T. Out of the whole team, four of us were youth, and we had 3 women. So it was a really great team. Again, had a lot of fun. It was a really great time. So kind of from that, we decided that the next year for the same contest, we wanted to do an entirely youth operation. And this was Connor W4IPC. This was kind of his idea. He got the whole thing together. And I'll talk more about that one in a little bit. Earlier in March of this year for the WPX, I went to St. Lucia, J62K, and I really want to talk about this team for a little bit. I've worked with a lot of different, different teams, different people who have been trying to reach out to young people, and they've, by far done the best job that I've ever seen. They fund every year they fund, I think it's usually 2 youth that go down there, for a contest. They have, I think it's some sort of like essay contest. You have to send in your application. And they pay for all the expenses for the young people to stay there for the week. And it's not just, hey, show up and operate. They actually take us through the entire, like setting up of the station. We're doing antenna work, doing repair on the station, really just teaching us everything, all the behind the scenes stuff. Because their goal, is eventually to have the young people take over. So they do a really good job of not only like including the youth, but, reaching out as well. So like I mentioned earlier this year, in October, CQ Worldwide, we did, it wasn't entirely youth, but the majority was. I think our average age was 21 for the operators. So this was a really good time. We had Megan came from Ireland. We had Leon from Germany. We had an operator from the Netherlands. It was a really good team. We came from all over the world, quite literally. And we definitely beat all of our goals and expectations. I think we came out with around 33 million points. So it was a really good time. And directly prior to the contest there in Curacao, I was in the North Cooks for my first real D expedition. Um, this was a lot of fun. We were active as Echo 51 Mike Whiskey Alpha, a list of operators there. And a lot of people were like, well, where the heck is Manahiki? This is in the North Cook Islands. So this kind of shows where it is on the globe. You can see, in the top right, there's North America. And then this is kind of a closer up of the Cook Islands in general. So it's actually made up of 15
Yeah, I
different
don't want to
islands.
waste his time.
I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but down here is Rarotonga, which is the main island. And then we were up here in Manahiki. So Rarotonga, the population is around 10,000, but the island that we were on, it was only about 200 people. They have an airlines that goes, between the different islands. So we flew into Rarotonga, which is, has the only main airport there. And then from Rarotonga, we took their inter-island flight to Manahiki. So this was the plane that we took. So the whole team met in Rarotonga, and then from there, it was an Embraer 110, had about 6 or 7 seats. You can see this is kind of the whole team packed in there. It was only about a 4-hour flight. We stopped in Aitutaki to refuel. And then once we landed on the island of Manahiki, they loaded all of the gear that we brought with us onto a tractor, and then that tractor took it to a boat. So here's all of our gear and equipment loaded onto a boat. And here we're going to the other side of the island. You can see here in the background these two different bungalows. So the one we used just as a shack. So we had the whole station in one, and we used the other one just for eating, sleeping.
This young gal is, oh, no,
And it's hard to like explain how blue the water was. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
I'll tell you later.
So then, obviously from the boat, we're unloading it into the house, and we had most of the actual equipment gear shipped ahead prior, which helped a lot. So, we had to unload all of that and start getting everything set up. So we arrived on Tuesday, so, we got to the island mid-afternoon and immediately started setting everything up. I don't have a lot of photos of the process of setting up, mainly because we were all very busy. But this is a photo of all our band pass filters. And then that's the final station set up. You can't beat that view. I think day 2 or 3, we started having some storms, some really high winds. You can see one of our VDAs blew over. And so this kind of it took us a little longer than expected to get all the antennas set up and actually get on the air. And then we spent about a day and a half troubleshooting, making sure all the stations were configured and everything. So I think it was day 3 that we actually got on the air. And this shows 3 of us here. And again, you can't beat that view. So this is a photo of where we were at with the antenna set up. And, as you can see, we tried to put all the VDAs as close to salt water as possible. A lot of the guy wires were actually anchored to sandbags out in the water. Every de-expedition, there's always things that go wrong. Within the first 2 days, we lost power for about 12 hours. So the island runs on solar, and they have a backup generator, and they were having issues with their backup generator. It was a really cloudy day, so we didn't have power for about 12 hours. Because of the storm, we had to, repair some of our antennas. We actually went down a K3, so we lost a radio. And then we had bad bandpass filters on both 12 and 17, so we couldn't really use either of those bands without major interference everywhere else. And you can see pictured here, we had a extension cord caught on fire. And then about day 4 or 5 of us operating, the whole backup generator for the island caught on fire. So not only did we not have solar power, because also the transformers for the solar power were in the same building as the backup generator, which burned as well. So they didn't have solar power, they didn't have their backup generator, they just didn't have power. Unfortunately for them, since it's so remote, they were looking at, up to 6 months without power. And even their cell phone tower had a 24-hour backup battery, but that was about it. So we were kind of out of options at this point, with it being such a remote island, they couldn't get parts easily or quickly. Thankfully, since we've left and we've gotten back, we got word that they were able to fix at least the solar power. So whenever it's sunny, they have power, which is, better than nothing. So at this point, we were basically, we were kind of forced to go QRT. We didn't really have any options. There was a few very small generators that the villagers were using, kind of sharing to, run their freezers and basic things like that. But there wasn't anything that we could use for, a station of our size to get back on the air. So what do you do when you can't operate? You go fishing. It was a really great location for that, obviously. And even though I was really sad that we had to go QRT, it was very unfortunate. We still made the best of it, and basically, spent time with the villagers, did everything we could on the island, and didn't just sit around and feel bad for ourselves. Our host actually showed us how they farm black pearls there, which is our host actually has the only black pearl farm on that island. So that was really neat, very unique. You don't really get to do that anywhere else in the world. Went and visited their church in the village. It was a really cool cultural experience. And this is just an interesting picture. This was the only store in the entire village. So, very, very basic things, but that was kind of neat. It's quite literally just in someone's house, like on their porch. So if you need groceries, that's where you go. I don't know if I mentioned this, but basically to get on the island, there's only one flight every 2 weeks. So we showed up there on a Tuesday and then we were there for 2 weeks until, the next plane came in. So even though we lost power and had to go QRT early, we were still basically just stuck on the island for, another week and a half. But this is, a photo of us. We're packing up our gear, heading back to the airport. And this is the little check-in counter, if you want to call it that. It wasn't even a building. It was more like just a shack. But it did the job. These are just some photos of the flight heading back to the mainland. And then from Rarotonga, we all took separate flights home. And here's a couple photos of the team. And that's all I have for that. After directly leaving the island, I got back to Rarotonga, and the rest of the operators were from Washington, so they all headed home. I actually went directly to Curacao for that youth contest team. To talk about an itinerary from hell, it was 72 hours. Over a span of 72 hours, I spent 35 hours in an airplane. Um, yeah, I had like 6 layovers, but thankfully I did make it on time for the contest. The contest started Friday evening and I got there Friday morning. And I'm really glad I didn't have any flight delays or anything like any kind of trip interruptions. But anyways, that's about all I have as far as the presentation goes. But I would really love to do some, if you guys have any questions, especially if you have any ideas about getting young people involved, how to kind of implement that in your club, I'd love to talk about it.
So are you in school or otherwise busy, or can you walk away from that
I'm not,
stuff?
I mean, yes, I am in school. I'm also a flight instructor here, which is my full-time job, in Colorado Springs. That's kind of the only reason I moved to Colorado was to start flight training here about 2 years ago. So actually, if you listen on Simplex 14652, I try to go aeronautical mobile as often as I can.
You may want to share your camera.
What was that?
You may want to share your camera. We just have a black screen.
Ah, 1 second.
So I had a similar event. I went to some small islands north of Australia and had same issues with power, not available. It only came on for an hour or two, and then it's all black for days, and then it comes back on. So I feel for you.
Yeah, and they had done, the team I was with, they've done multiple different DX operations before. Obviously, this was my first time doing kind of a DX operation. But, previously on their trips, if it was a place that, has power issues, they would always bring a generator. But this place, they haven't had any power issues, for the last several decades. Like it was completely unexpected, but it was unfortunate, but yeah.
Violetta, this is Joe. Thanks for doing this. I do appreciate it, and we'll see you on the 13th for sure. Um, was that your personal generator or the group's generator, or was that the island's generator that burned up?
That was the island's generator, yeah. So we didn't have a generator with us. This was, how the island got power. So whenever that burned, I mean, it left the whole island out of power, or at least, the part of the island that we were on.
They only had one for all those people?
Well, it's 200 people. So, I mean,
Oh, well, I guess that's it.
yeah.
So when you had power, were you running QRP, or did you have amplifiers with you?
Life's too short for QRP. We had, I think there were two KPA 1500s, and then we had a 500 watt for our third station. So, yep. Oh, I forgot to mention, we also made, I mean, I think we were on the air for 3 or 4 days. During that time we had that 12 hours of power outage, but we still made over, I think it was a little over 20,000 contacts. So,
That's really great. I think it's super. You got to remember these guys are QRPs are 500 watts. I think Dick's over there.
Yeah, could you go over just briefly what kind of antennas you used on your de-expedition? And of course, we all know that just putting an antenna next to salt water gets about at least 6 to 8 dB gain anyway. But kind of what did you guys use for your various stations?
yeah, everybody said that we were super loud, which is great. I think that's because we were so close to salt water. Like I said, some of them were almost sitting right in salt water. For the most part, we used VDAs for the different bands. That was great because they're very, they're super easy. It doesn't take long to assemble them. And putting them up too, they're not that difficult. And then we also had some, I think they were the crank IRs. We had two or three of those we had three of them, one for 80, 30, and 40. And I think the rest were the VDAs. So, and then 20 meters was a dipole. And then for 6 meters, we had something different. We actually had some pretty good 6 meter openings when we were down there, which was great. That was kind of a last minute addition. We hadn't planned to take anything for 6 meters, but I'm glad we did because that was honestly my first chance working 6 meters at all. So it was fun.
No, you and I have talked about this before, but since you said keep young people away from FT8 or things like that, how much FT8 to voice or CW did you guys do?
Um, I don't know the actual numbers. I mostly did sideband, and I wasn't a huge fan of FT8 going into the de-expedition. I used it enough to, I knew how to run it, and that was about it. I didn't really enjoy it. But I do have to say, after 6 hours of running a sideband pileup, FT8's not too bad. It's the only way to save your voice. So.
You got that, Greg? We have a person here who hates digital, so
I mean, I'm not gonna go out there and say it's my favorite mode of all time, but I think it has its purpose for sure.
You mentioned operating from an airplane, hopefully not during a flight instruction. Um, but I'm curious what bands you'd be operating on, and like, have you tried any HF bands? Are you trailing an antenna out the back of the plane or anything like that?
No, nothing crazy like that. The when I fly, I'm just renting from a flight club here in the Springs, so unfortunately I can't really have any kind of like permanent installation in the airplane. So far, I've only just done 2 meters on simplex. Let's see, what was it? Just this last weekend, I think I made about a dozen contacts. I was flying from the Springs up to Fort Collins and then back down to the Springs. um, and talk to a couple local people. But no HF as of yet, but maybe someday.
Future
And no, it's
challenge.
definitely not during an instructional flight. You got to keep your eyes on the students at all times. They will try to kill you.
Oh, I know. I was one once.
What did you fly?
Just 172s out of
Nice.
Centennial, and then I call it Jeffco, but it's Metro.
From Jeffco, yeah. I fly mostly Pipers. I really don't have that much time in a Cessna. Do you still fly?
No, I discovered it's stupidly expensive, and just to do it for fun was like, well, there's a lot of other things I want to spend my money on. So,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, aviation, nothing is cheap in aviation. So,
yeah, people think ham radio is expensive. Try flying. Anyone else?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate everything you did, and sorry for the wait. You've been great, and I'm glad we had you, really. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate this. Let's give her a big hand, folks.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. I wish I could be there with you all.
Well, you certainly could have, but it's a long way up there. So, um, yeah, she could have flown up. That's true. James could have got
Do you
you.
do you hold these meetings every month?
Yes, we do. We have a meeting every third Saturday right here. So you're
All
more than
right.
welcome to come up.
Sounds good.
I do know a guy that comes up from Arvada, but he's taking an extra test right now. So he'll be up next month. So,
Good luck to him.
yeah, you can carpool with him. Thanks again for doing this, and she's going to be at. I've never really met her. We've talked a few times on Zoom, but that's pretty much. We'll see her on the 13th on the Mile High DX Christmas party, holiday party. Yeah, we do have our Ham Fest in January, on January 17th.
Oh, neat.
It is the world's biggest. No, it's not really. It's Colorado's biggest ham fest on January. It's the first one of the year, so we have pretty good turnout. We have 400 or 500 people that show up, and it's a pretty good deal. Check
Oh, nice.
ncarc.co. That's our website. Everything's right there.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, hopefully I'll meet some of you there.
Yeah, I hope so. We might even make you a presenter or something up there. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You have a good one.
Thank you for
Take
having
care.
me.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.